principles of design is the next element in composing or creating your graphic work. They use the elements of design, which are the building blocks we talked about in the earlier session, and they arrange them in a way, and that's how you compose your work of art. We will talk a lot about composition in this class. It's the arrangement of your subjects and the elements in your work of art. And the principles of design are the key element that contributes to your overall composition and makes your graphic design work effective. The first principle we're going to talk about is the principle of balance. Balance refers to the way the parts of a composition are placed. It can also refer to as the visual weight, where one side might feel heavier than the other. There are two types of balance that we're going to look at. The first is symmetrical balance, and that's where everything is equally distributed. It looks the same on both sides. If you were to fold the design in half vertically, both sides would look the same, be a mirror image. And the same would be true horizontally if that's the way you're going with your symmetrical design. The other aspect is asymmetrical design. That's where things are uneven, where one side seems visually heavier than the other. So you might have a few more elements on one side to make it feel a little bit weightier or to bring emphasis to one point, where there's a lot more empty space or white space used in the other side. Next is the principle of contrast. Contrast shows the differences between the elements of art or the subjects in your design. When you're thinking of contrast, think of like a compare and contrast chart. When you compare two things, you're showing the similarities. When you're contrasting two things, you're showing the differences. The same is true in graphic design. When you're using the principle of contrast, you're showing the differences between an element. For example, if you're looking at line or using line as your element, you could show the contrast of a curved line with a jagged line. Or you can use an organic shape with a geometric shape. You can even contrast your subject matter, showing something like good versus evil, or tall versus short. So it's any way you use your subjects or your elements to contrast or show a difference in your design. Emphasis is the next principle of design we're going to talk about, and it's one of my favorites. Emphasis uses a focal point or a center of interest in the design. I really like this principle because I just like that concept of drawing people's attention to one specific thing in a design. Emphasis can be used with a single element of design, such as a single shape like a circle in the middle of a blank space, but a lot of times it's used in combination with other elements of design. For example, using lines to draw your eye to a single focal point, or using small shapes to draw your eye to a center of focus. Emphasis can also be used with other principles of design. For example, these movie posters use the principle of contrast and emphasis. The contrast of color with the orange and the blue, or even the red with the dark muted grays and blacks in the background, create contrast, but it also draws emphasis to a certain point. The next principle of design we're going to look at is movement. Movement shows action, and it directs your eye throughout the work of art. And if used properly, can be a very effective tool for moving people throughout your design. Movement can be used on its own, as in it's the only principle used in your design, but a lot of times it's used in combination with other principles of design. You can have movement from one value to another, from contrast. You can have movement from balance, showing an asymmetrical balance where it's heavier on one side to a more empty area. So movement can be used in a variety of ways, all of which are effective, but it's really up to you which one you think works best for your design. Next, we have the principle of proportion. Proportion is the relationship of the size of objects within a work of art. In other words, it's the scale of the objects, large and small. Proportion helps communicate the relationship between subjects in your design. It can also show level of importance. Things larger will be more important than those that are smaller. Things larger can also seem like it's overwhelming, where smaller things seem kind of insignificant. It can also help you put you in the shoes of your subject. So if you wanted to show maybe this small penguin and you've got these large people and the legs around them, you don't see the whole person, but just from their knees down. So it kind of puts you at their level, gives you a feel of what it's like to be that person, which can kind of help communicate the story you're trying to tell or the mood you're trying to tell with your design. Finally, we have the principle of rhythm. Rhythm is a type of movement that is seen in the repeating of shapes and colors or other elements in your work. What separates rhythm from movement in terms of principles of design is movement can be one line or two lines that just kind of push you to one point. With rhythm, it's a repetition or a pattern of shapes, lines, colors, or whatever element you're looking at. It can be seen as repeating shapes that vary back and forth with different proportions and sizes, It can be colors that go back and forth, red, and black. It can even be the same shape, but repeated over and over, but transformed and rotated in different directions. So it appears different, but you have this rhythmic, almost repetition kind of feel to it. Think of it kind of like music. It's kind of a beat, a visual beat in your design. As you can see, there's a lot more to graphic design than just throwing some sketches and some colors and words on a piece of paper. There's some real thought that needs to go into it. The key is to know the mood and message you want to communicate in your design, and then choose the proper elements and principles to effectively communicate your design. Well, that's all we have for this session. Next, we're going to talk a little bit more about typography and how to use words and text in your designs. Thanks for watching.